With nearly 12,000 tools available, selecting the right MarTech can be challenging. Meet the MarTech Intelligence Reports, free buyer's guides exploring specific platforms, including purchase considerations, leading players, adoption trends, and more. No matter where you are in the purchase journey, MarTech Intelligence Reports can help.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the final panel of the day, How AI Decisioning Will Change Your Marketing. I'm Lauren Shoemate. I'm a go-to-market advisor, aka the Revenue Muse and Global VP of Marketing for QAD Supply Chain Group. I will be your moderator today, and we have a tremendous panel that I'm so excited to introduce to you today. First, we have Jonathan Moran. Jonathan is a head of MarTech Solutions Marketing at SAS. We have Katie Robert. Katie is a CEO of TrustInsights.ai. And finally, we have Kara Alcalmo from Alcalmo Marketing, founder and CEO. Thank you so much for our great panelists here today. We look forward to hearing your great insights. A quick reminder to the audience today is that if you have questions or comments during this session, please drop them into the chat box. We will do our best to incorporate them into conversation. We have about 10 minutes at the end that we'll also be taking more questions. So please go ahead and put your questions and comments into the chat box. But let's get started, shall we? To kick things off, I'm going to start with something simple to our panel. One sentence. What is AI decisioning? Kara, let's start with you.
Oh man, I have to go first. Okay, no pressure. I'll try to keep it to one sentence. AI decisioning is, to me, more closely aligned with how human decision making goes, in that it uses real-time data and patterns and analyzes that to determine the best action instead of legacy decision tree if-then sort of logic that requires you to know and map out all of the possible routes.
Love that. Love that. Katie, what's one sentence or so? AI decisioning.
I think Kara said it really well. It is about patterns and the trends and really just giving AI the tools it needs to make the decisions that you've decided it's going to make on your behalf. And, you know, I know we're going to get into the other pieces of what you can and can't do with it. So I'll save that for the rest of the panel.
Sounds good. And finally, you, Jonathan.
Yeah, to jump on. So AI decisioning, right? It's the evolution of traditional enterprise decisioning. It uses artificial intelligence to learn from, past data types, right? Structured, unstructured data patterns, interactions, trends to adapt and deliver decisions over periods of time. That would be my definition, Lauren.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Okay. So audience, what about you? We're going to do a poll that we'd love for you to participate. And some instructions on the poll before we do is that first you will be asked to join the audience to participate. Then you will enter your first name and you will click a join audience button. Then you will click on the polls icon that's in the right-hand corner of the video. And then the poll will come up on the right side of the video panel and you'll select one option. Okay. And so let's see here if I hope that's happening on your side. And if you I'll go ahead and read the question. Who has implemented AI decisioning in their company? Answers: 1, doing it well. 2, thought about it. 3, working on data hygiene. 4, not sure where to begin. So again, instructions, you'll be asked to join the audience to participate. You enter your first name, click on the join audience button, click on the polls icon in the top right corner. You'll see the poll come up on the right side of the panel of the window, and then please select your option. And let's wait a minute for everyone to put their votes in. And When ready, let's go and show the results. Oh, wow. Okay. We're pretty split here. This is awesome. Okay. All right, then. This is really interesting. Okay, so with that said, let's jump into some details about that. So we've got some real advanced folks on. We've got folks that are just learning. So why don't we start first with the topic of data hygiene? Boy, that's a huge one. I can't wait to hear what the experts say on this one. Okay, so the question for the panel is. Why is data hygiene so important when AI is so smart? And what is your recommended approach? So, Katie, I'm going to have you go first on this one, if you would.
I could talk about data hygiene all day, but to try to keep it concise, it's like putting your data into any piece of software. You want the best possible quality data that you can present because you don't want those gaps. You don't want AI to make assumptions, especially when you're talking about decisioning. You want to make sure you have every piece. And the way that I approach it, there's, a joke within the industry of, I have a framework for that. Well, I do have a framework for that for pretty much everything. And in this instance, I have what's called the 6 C's data quality framework. And it basically, at a high level, helps the user go through a 6 point check to audit their data. So it's clean, complete, comprehensive, calculable, chosen, and credible. And yes, you can use AI to do that audit, which is a whole separate webinar.
Love it, love it. And it's so interesting how important frameworks are these days for reducing risk and keeping control. Kara, some thoughts from your end on
Yeah.
data hygiene?
Similar, I think Katie and I could probably fill an entire day, and if we had Jonathan, maybe a whole week on data hygiene. But Katie's framework is amazing. I want to give an example of why, even if you have good data hygiene, AI can still hallucinate. And so, for example, and I'll put myself on the spot here. Like we have this AI project manager agent we've built internally, and I was trying to use AI where I probably shouldn't have. In that I was the way that we structured it, we would give the AI agent the folder ID and say, hey, go, look in this folder and tell us what's been going on for this project. And it would literally still hallucinate the folder ID. We would give it the right one and it would decide, you know what, I'll make up a new one. And it would go run the search and it would error out. And so even when we had good data hygiene, we still had to make a decision of, you know what, in this use case, it's better to be deterministic and just run the search using that folder ID and give that output, that data to the agent so it can analyze it instead of try to use it for both of those things. So data hygiene to me is kind of like the bare necessity, and then on top of that, it's strategic use of AI. Where does it actually make sense, and where is it trying to put a square peg into a round hole?
Yeah, I get it. Any final comments of the group on such this big topic, or for your audience, any questions in chat that you'd like us to answer regarding data hygiene? Again, to Katie's point, we could talk about this all day.
Well, I just want to reinforce the really astute point that Kara just made about it's the baseline. Before you do anything approaching AI or really any technology, data hygiene is your baseline. It is your step zero. Well, probably your step zero is why am I doing this in the first place? Step one is then good data hygiene. So I think that was a really good way to frame it.
I like that too. And I think that's good advice to most anything with AI for sure. Well, good deal. Well, I want to move on to the next question. Again, I encourage the audience to put questions into the chat so we make sure that you are heard. But the next question here. Okay, so as you start using Gen AI as an extension of your team, what standards would you hold AI to regarding privacy, bias mitigation, etc.? So I'm going to have Kara, if you would go first on this question.
I'll keep going down the path of the AI project manager agent, and I'll focus more on privacy. And so, as an extension of the team, I kind of think of privacy for this agent in the same way I would privacy and data compliance for a coworker, right? And so, for example, when we have this project manager agent doing weekly status updates, right? We're not giving it access to every piece of data across every project and every client that we have, because it doesn't need that for that use case. We're only giving it the minimum data that it needs to do that job in that moment. And that is kind of similar, again, to like how you would treat a coworker. We're not giving everyone in the company access to every file and every project, right? So I kind of use that as a guideline when I'm thinking about how do I permission and how do I decide what to give it and when, right?
Yeah, I love that. I like when we take human concepts and we parallel them with technology. Love that. Jonathan, any thoughts about this question?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, any type of AI, right, whether it's generative AI, as you mentioned in the question, agentic, or even traditional AI based techniques, right, are reliant on quality data, right? We've established that. So I think that, governance is super important. And once that data is in good shape, then AI and analytics can use that data to derive insight. But here's the thing, Lauren. SAS recently did some research, right? We surveyed, 300 AI leaders worldwide, and along with an organization by the name of Coleman Parks, and we looked at organizations' readiness for AI initiatives. So I think it's probably not surprising that 80 to 85% of all personas in an organization say that they use AI daily. Right. And so very broad usage. But then the next question following that was, well, what kind of governance do you have in place to, understand data privacy and bias mitigation and those sorts of things? Well, we found through that research that 7% of organizations have a well-established governance framework. 5% have training around how to use AI and what AI governance looks like. And 9% believe that they're fully prepared to comply with regulations. So what does that leave us? That leaves us a major gap between usage and readiness. So that creates concern and risk, right? And I think that, when we ask about we ask organizations, what are your top concerns when it comes to the usage of generative AI and AI? The top three were data privacy, security, and governance. And this is above things like ethical use, accuracy, cost, trust, things like that, right? So this screams that organizations, and particularly people within organizations, are hungry for, enablement, education, standards, that sort of thing. So, as for the question you asked was about standards, right? What should standards focus on?
Or privacy, bias mitigation, standards.
Yeah. So, the standards should really focus on, as Katie mentioned, right? What's your use case, right? What's the boundaries? What are you looking for AI to do? What are, the ethical guidelines that are in place to detect and mitigate biases, right? What type of privacy and data protection is there, right? Do you have compliance and data protection laws to adhere with regulations? Are you testing the outputs of AI? That's extremely important, right? Or things like hallucination occur. So you've got to have that quality assurance and testing in place. And then I think one of the most important things is obviously that human component. So humans, users should know how to effectively and responsibly use AI and implement guardrails, right? Because without those guardrails, AI can become unwieldy. And then finally, a review process, whether it's an AI ethics board or a review board, to understand, potential issues related to the AI system. So those are just a few things that I think organizations should be thinking about as they're developing and implementing standards.
Well, how do you propel that maturity in an organization? Because a lot of the things you said are pretty big lifts. So, what are some best practices to propel that maturity?
Yeah, I really think it comes back to education and understanding, right? Having teams that are dedicated to things like this, right? Not making AI ethics and things and data security and things like that like an afterthought, right? Or someone's second job, right? Create a team that's actually focused on doing that, right? Understanding AI, educating the organization on AI, ensuring that the people, the technology, the processes are all in place to do things correctly versus trying to do it haphazardly.
Yeah. And do you hire to that, or is that something that your internal employees can be, with education, can be up leveled? Do you have any opinion on that?
Yeah, well, I think it depends on the size of the organization, right? So if it's a smaller company, then you probably want to outsource that, right? There are a lot of AI consultancies that can help with that. If you're a larger organization and you have the bandwidth and the resource, then I would try to in-house it as much as I could.
Yeah. Well, and Katie, this is a good bridge in the question to you. So I asked the question to you as what standards would you hold AI to regarding privacy and bias mitigation, et cetera, and the maturity of companies to reach that.
Well, I think Kara and John did a really good job of talking through the standards. And one of the things that we see as people are getting started with AI or are even a couple of years into their journey is that this topic tends to be an afterthought as much as we don't want it to be. And so, big shock, I have a framework for that. It's going to be my new catchphrase.
Do that.
The framework is raft. So think of it as like your life raft or, something that's going to save you. So it's respect, accountability, fairness, and transparency. And really the goal of the framework is to help you think through those pieces as it applies to AI. Because not everyone has, to John's point, a legal team that they can rely on or policies that are already in place. So thinking through just sort of the basics and, along the lines of what Kara said, what standards would you hold a human to? So what kind of mutual respect, what kind of accountability, what kind of fairness, and this kind of goes into the bias, making sure you're, really examining that. And then the transparency, and that goes to what information are you sharing with your customers about how you're using AI, because you may not think they care, but they do care.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. All right. So I'm going to move on to the next question. That was a good one. I enjoyed that one. Okay. So next question for the panel. Create a roadmap. How do you create a roadmap to test, scale, and measure AI decisioning so you can prove incremental ROI? Oof. Because at the end of the day, that's what they asked us to do. So why don't we, John, why don't we start with you on this one?
Yeah. So, I think that this is where we actually get into the nuts and bolts of how is this actually done, right? And so as I think about, MarTech stacks and ecosystems and, anyone who knows me knows that I love to talk architecture and create these diagrams and whatnot. But ideally within a MarTech stack or ecosystem, AI decisioning is implemented at the enterprise cross-organizational level, meaning more than just one line of business or department can benefit from it, right? So it's not just a marketing thing; it's a sales thing, a service thing, a support thing. If we start with, we've talked about this, and we start with those quick win, high value use cases within a certain department or line of business, we have the opportunity to test and refine outputs as well as data inputs, right? We might figure out that our data hygiene is terrible and that we need to go back to that, right? So, an organization might start with a high value use case in support, right? Serving real time adapted decisions to either a contact center agent, maybe a contact center agent first, right? Who can look at and kind of approve or refine the decisions that are served. And then after that starts working well, then we serve it directly to the chatbot or something like that, right? From there, you can scale it out to more departments, more complex use cases once the data integration, the processes, all of that is solid, right? So the idea here is to develop and build for the entire organization up front versus, again, an afterthought and activating it one department at a time. And I think that once measurable, positive ROI starts coming from one or two use cases, then, you can start scaling it across more use cases and departments.
Yeah, I like that. Katie, thoughts on that? How do you look at ROI?
I know, big shock. I have a
Yes.
framework for that.
So
Uh,
we're chatting behind the scenes about how Katie needs a T-shirt that says, "I have a framework for that."
I do, I really do.
Please tell.
So this is the 5P framework, and this is our foundational framework. So
Love it.
it's purpose, people, process, platform, and performance. And so building on what John just said about, really making sure you have the strong use case, the 5Ps is the way that you can, pick apart and get the details into that use case. So purpose being, what is the question we're trying to answer? What is the problem we're trying to solve? People, who's involved, internally, externally, process. How do we do this today? Where does AI fit in? Platform, what tools do we need to use? Have we thought through all of the different pieces? Because AI really stands alone. It's generally a support system to other things in your ecosystem. And then performance. This is where the ROI comes in. Did we answer the question? Did we solve the problem? And a lot of times the question is around finding efficiencies or getting time back. So how do you figure that out? And that comes in from understanding your people and your process. So first you need to know, what is the process today? And if I introduce AI, what is the process tomorrow? That's where you're going to start to understand your excuse me, that's my Boston accent coming through, your ROI.
That's true. How prepared do you think companies are today that they actually laser focus their inefficiencies and would time how long it takes to certain things versus just gut feel of like this is just taking too long? I mean, how pragmatic are companies when they approach those use cases? And because you need a jumping off point, you need to be like, okay, well, where do we start to know where we what AI can afford us? So
The idealist in me wants to believe that they're very prepared, but the realist in me, it knows that time tracking and SOPs and process development are not high on priority lists. And so when we're talking about measuring ROI, the challenge with that is if you're not measuring it today, how do you know that you're actually getting any kind of return? And so that tends to make a lot of companies stumble backwards to go, oh, what do you mean I need to know what's happening today in order to know if I'm getting an return on investment tomorrow?
yeah,
So the companies have the data,
yeah.
period, but they're not necessarily doing what they need to do with it in order to appropriately measure ROI. So it's a big conversation. What's the ROI of AI? How do I measure it? You need to first start by understanding what's happening today without including our AI in the conversation.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Kara, thoughts on your end?
Yeah, I mean, my brain is going about 1,000 miles a minute because I'm just
Oh, bring
thinking
it.
about all the good things Katie and Jonathan said. When I think about creating the roadmap, I think in this particular space, AI and the developments in this space are moving so quickly that it's really important to balance the planning with the execution, right? And so when I'm thinking about a roadmap, I'm thinking about what's the one thing I can do right now that is going to have a measurable impact, and that's where I focus most of my time and energy, sort of planning out. Everything else, like you can put it in a roadmap at a high level, but you don't want to spend too much time getting the perfect roadmap, because by the time, if you spend 6 months on that, then by the time that's done, the technology is going to have changed so much it will be irrelevant. So we're thinking in like 2 weeks and months in terms of sprints. Like, all right, what are we going to do in the next month with AI, and then let's go run, and then we'll revisit the roadmap when we finish that. And Jonathan said something that I thought was really smart as well, which is like, we've talked a lot about data hygiene. It's a foundation, it's a necessary component, and that is true. And it doesn't all have to be perfect. If you're starting with a specific line of business, like he mentioned, or a specific use case, like we've talked about, what the data that is necessary for that use case is what needs to be ready, not your entire ecosystem. So like going back to the project manager agent, we had to have our project data locked and loaded and ready for that. Like, but we didn't have to have HR data, because that's just not part of it, right? And even more specifically within that, like we started with one project. We got all the data, all the joins and everything mapped out, and then we tested it with that, made sure it worked, and then we rolled it out to the rest of the project, and then we're moving on to different use cases. So I think in terms of creating the roadmap, again, just balance like execution with planning and have more of a bias for action, and I think you'll end up in a better place.
Love that. Any other final thoughts from the panel on this particular question? Let's see if you.
I just want to reinforce the point that Kara just made because it was such a good one. Having that hyper focus on one thing, one task, one action is really going to help when you're talking about data hygiene, because both the panelists are right. It feels very daunting and overwhelming to get to this perfect state, which really truly never exists. But if you really focus in on that one use case, as John said, and as Kara said, then you're going to get to the action faster. And so being very picky about where you're starting and really focusing in on what is just that data that I need is going to get you to that pilot program, to that roadmap faster.
Yeah, I love that. Great advice in this question. Great. Okay, let's move on to our final question. How can listeners start to evolve their current stack to move to AI decisioning? John, why don't we start first with you on this question?
Yeah. So I think the idea of evolution is interesting, right? So I've thought about this and had conversations about this with various folks. And in my mind, AI decisioning is an evolution of traditional enterprise decisioning, right? We mentioned that kind of at the top, right? It uses static business rules, conditional logic to make decisions. For example, right, if a customer visits your web page or a certain page on your website, then they get an email for a certain product or offer. Pretty standard stuff, right? But with AI decisioning, you're using reinforcement learning to learn and adapt based on the customer behavior patterns of similar customers or customers in audiences that might include, certain customers or overlapping customers. So I think that, the first thing organizations need to do is get pretty good at enterprise decisioning, right? And then they can evolve accordingly into AI. And I know, and I think we would all vouch for this as consumers, that not all organizations do enterprise decisioning very well today, right? So AI decisioning, which is the evolution of enterprise decisioning, relies obviously on high quality data, great analytic techniques like reinforcement learning and other machine learning techniques within broader AI to do the decisioning, and the ability to create integrations to serve the decisions that are made by the AI systems into a variety of activation channels. And then, after you do all of that, you've got to have a feedback loop to know if the decisions that are being served are actually good. People are actually converting, right? If they're being served in a semi-autonomous manner by AI decisioning systems, are they hitting the mark, right? So my advice for evolution would be, as we've kind of said throughout this call, start with the data, work your way up through insight to the activation channel.
Yeah, this is a big question. I'd be curious from the audience today, like if there's any questions that you have about this question, or any experiences that you have to add to this conversation. We so welcome them as we move through the panel, if you would. Katie, thoughts on this question? Do you have a framework for this one? Is really my question.
I do. It is more of a checklist. But in this particular, I'll spare you the framework. But in this particular one, it's really about, from my perspective, process documentation. So as John mentioned, start with the data. I would add to that, you don't want to hand off decisions to AI that you yourself don't understand all the components that go into it. And so, to Kara's point on the previous question, starting smaller, picking one thing, really doing good process documentation so that when you hand it off to an AI system, you can see start to finish, this is what it's doing, every process, every piece of it, where the data goes in. And this is the stuff that, unfortunately, it's the less fun stuff. It's not the shiny doing stuff. It's more of the requirements gathering, but it's so necessary and important. However, I am a firm believer, and things I like to say are, this is the hill I will die on, is that good process documentation, if you take the time to do it, will
Yeah.
get you to the doing faster, because then you can just slot it right in. You know exactly where things are working, things aren't working, and it's going to get you to that evolution much quicker if you do the foundational work first.
Yeah, I like that. This is definitely an area not to cut corners. So I definitely understand that for sure. Good. Kara, what are your thoughts on this loaded question?
I mean, number one, who says process documentation is not fun? Very satisfying. Usually, sometimes there's whiteboards and markers. It can be very fun. So that's the first thing. The second thing, I want to go back. You asked, how can you start to evolve your current stack? And I want to hone in on the word evolve, because you didn't say add to, right? And I think the first inclination a lot of people have is, oh, what AI tool or module can I buy or add to my stack that's going to, give me that capability? And I would encourage people to not buy anything until you have gone through, like what Katie and Jonathan mentioned. Like you know exactly what you're trying to do. You know what is in your current stack. You know that nothing in there can satisfy that use case, and you've gone through any other use case that you could have done without it, right? So like you're paying for, I know exactly what I want to do, and I can't do it. I've tried everything. I can't figure out a way to do it with my current stack. Like that's the point you should be at before you go add anything, because otherwise you end up with just tech bloat.
Yeah.
And
I think sometimes we think that the technology is magical and can solve all of our problems. And if anything, from this panel today, and from just experience listening more and more of how of AI applications, is just how human it is, and how important it is to get strategy in place and to really understand the business needs, the behaviors of your people, really what's going to move the needle. So no, I appreciate this discussion. Any other final comments on this question? Would love again for the audience to put any questions or comments into the chat. Would be great. We'd love to share those with the broader audience today.
I have a comment, I guess, because I was thinking about Katie's process documentation. I have been genuinely shocked at how small and discrete we've had to get when it comes to decisioning. Like you think, oh, it can decide, to whether to target this person or that person, or it can decide, whatever. We've had to break down decisions into just the most tiny little points and give the AI tool just that one little piece of a decision for it to actually work, and then build out from there. And so I think that's like one thing I would call out when you're thinking about AI decisioning is get it to the most minute, the smallest component you can, make sure that works, and then you can start to add functionality and add complexity to that decisioning process. And that reveals itself through that process mapping is what I found.
Love that. This is a great discussion. I'm going to take a minute to move to the audience for some final questions before we conclude today. Would love again some comments or questions from the viewers. This is the time to do it. I will say that some questions have come in that I'd like to address that interesting enough around data hygiene. Go figure. So I'm going to go ahead and read those off to the panel. So this one is from Joseph Rizzo. How are you defining good data hygiene? Seems like a broad term. So who'd like to take that one?
I'd be happy to take that one because I get to talk about frameworks again. It's my love language, apparently. Frameworks and Venn diagrams.
Your love language.
You're absolutely right. Data quality, data hygiene, it is such a broad term, which is why, all jokes aside, we did create a framework so that you at least had some, ground rules, some guardrails, some checkpoints to say, does it meet the following criteria? Therefore, I feel good about the quality of my data. And so, just as a high level, so the 6 C's again, it's clean, prepared well, free of errors. It's complete, no missing information. It's comprehensive, must cover the question being asked. This is sort of a big one. If we're, looking to understand our social media engagement, but we're looking at our marketing automation data, that might be a mismatch. So it's like those basic things. Calculable, must be workable and usable by business users. So is it, structured in a way? How many of us have downloaded data from a system and the date is just this string of nonsense versus like month, day, year? Chosen, no irrelevant or confusing data, incredible, must be collected in a valid way. This really speaks to if you're using third-party data that you're then reliant on and have to speak to and defend. Do you know how that data was collected? So think survey data, think market research data. Was it a representative sample or was it an N of one, just one person's opinion? And so that at a high level is how I personally approach defining data hygiene, because a framework is something I can wrap my head around. It's something that I can then defend and say, I hit these points, therefore I feel pretty confident that I have good data hygiene.
Yeah, I love that acronym. Plus the fact that your acronyms spell words make marketers very happy.
I mean,
Right?
you have to get that first. It has to be catchy, and then you can get into the details.
Yes, exactly. No, I love that. That's a really great guide for sure. Any other comments on this particular question from Joseph again about data hygiene? Any final thoughts?
Just, I think what Katie said, the hygiene is and the definition of hygiene is relative to the ask, the use case. What are you trying to do? And so I like that part of your framework, Katie, that it's like specific to what you're trying to accomplish. That's how you choose how to define it.
Okay. All right. All of a sudden, lots of questions came in. I'm getting excited. Okay, so this one is. Apologize if I mispronounce names up front. So, Shaunak Chatterjee, what are enterprises tackling? Where are enterprises tackling data hygiene first to support micro decisioning (tactical) or macro decisioning (strategic)? Why is that the case?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that one. So I think that, it's really organizations are focusing more on kind of the tactical data, right? Because, strategic success criteria is always good for a marketing campaign or a customer journey or that sort of thing. But that's not the data that they're relying on to serve AI decisions into customer engagement channels, right? They're more reliant on that tactical data, right? Demographic data, social data about the customer that's going to give them insights into customer, patterns, behaviors, trends, that sort of thing. So while I think both are important from a data quality perspective, I think that tactical data focus is needed within a MarTech stack to actually perform the AI decisioning.
Yeah. All right, so that we have time, I'm going to move through some other questions. This one is for Laura Roselli. Where do you think customers are with being receptive to AI decisioning?
Oh, that's fun because I feel like there's a wide range, right? Like you've got some people that are so all in on it to a fault, and maybe I was one of those people trying to feed, my PM agent, make it do things that it wasn't best suited to. And then on the flip side, you have people who are very reluctant to use AI in any form, whether because of fear, meaning, is this going to take my job, or just, I don't have time to learn this thing and it's changing really quickly. The funny thing is, most marketers are already using it and they don't even realize. Like if you're using automated bid strategies in any of your advertising, you're using AI decisioning already. And so it's already in there and it's just a matter of expanding that use case.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Okay, I want to get a few more questions in before we conclude. Kara and Katie, can you expand on or give examples of what it means to get granular on the data that you're feeding to AI to improve decisioning?
Yeah, I'm assuming this is to go back to that comment about getting really discreet with the process, right? And so it was less about the data granularity and more about like the step granularity. So, for example, instead of asking the PM agent, I want you to write me a weekly project status report. There's a lot of things that go into that, right? It has to go look in ClickUp, which is what we use as our project management platform. It goes and looks in Google Drive. It looks at emails. It looks at Slack channels, and each of those is a step in that bigger process, and it has to decide, like, where do I go first? What do I include? What do I not? And so what we found is we can't just ask it to do that whole thing. It sounds like it's one decision or one task is just write the project status report, but it's actually way more. It's a series of very, very granular tasks, as granular as that example I gave earlier, which is like, I have to go pull the data from this tool, and what folder am I going to go to, right? So that's, I don't know if that's a helpful example, if that's what you meant too, like getting very granular with the decisions.
Yeah, I love this. Katie, any thoughts from you, since the question was asked to both of you?
Yeah. The analogy that I like to give is that it's sort of akin to baking. And so it's, if you think about a recipe for baking, if you know about baking, baking is a bit of chemistry, it's following instructions, and there's steps that you need to do in a certain order. So, for example, if you're making cookies or a cake and it calls for butter and sugar, the first thing you want to do is cream the butter and sugar together versus just throw every ingredient into a bowl, because you're going to get very different results. And so you want to make sure that you are
You
taking the
tell me,
steps.
Katie.
That explains it.
I mean, there you go.
Worst cook ever. You just pretty much you pegged it. Yeah. I
But
love
it's thinking about it in those terms. And so it's not meant to be a daunting exercise, but really thinking through what is the correct order of steps that I need to take. And as Kara was mentioning, what are the different systems? We have to look here. We have to look here. So I often advise people think about it like a recipe that you're explaining to someone how to cook something. And that tends to feel less overwhelming because it's like, oh, I did need a pinch of pepper, or I did need an exact tablespoon of, baking powder in order to let the, pastry rise, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Those are the details that if you skip those, you'll still get a result. It may not be as good, but you'll get something. I mean, if you switch out the sugar and salt, been there, done that, not as good, kind of disappointing.
Love that. That is such a good analogy. That's great. Lisa Shaw, thank you for such a good question. Okay, just two more. Can I do two more? Okay, this one. Oh, I'm excited about this one. From Emmanuel Jolly. What is your view of all the AI-driven go-to-market operations promoted on LinkedIn using many AI-based tools that claim AI making all decisions with no to very with not very many few humans involved? Is it hype or credible in your views? This is a good one.
Yeah, I'll jump in first here. So I think that the point we are at in history right now, and what we've seen happen with AI recently, I won't give specific examples, but we all know that some bad things have happened. That all AI should have a human in the loop at some point in the process. Period. If brands are saying that they can, do fully, autonomous AI and, not involve humans at all, that's a red flag for me. That signals danger, and I think, it goes back to what we've been discussing throughout our conversation today, which is AI can make a decision, but if it doesn't have the right data, it's going to make a wrong decision, right? And so that could very well happen. So I am a proponent of human in the loop at all times currently.
Love it. Any other comments by the panelists on that one?
The red flag.
If I nod and agree with John any harder, I'm going to pull a muscle. Like, yes, human intervention. I I think it's hype. I think anyone who's making those claims, you really need to go in with a very skeptical lens because
Yeah.
it's well, here's the thing. Yes, it can make decisions. It's going to make bad decisions. And I think, Jonathan and Kara have covered that. Like, if you don't have any kind of human intervention, that's a huge red flag. Just walk away.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's such a great question from Emmanuel, but I mean, a lot of vendors are being pretty reckless about how they represent.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So
For sure.
yeah.
And I'm seeing backlash already. Honestly, like some of, you hear people come back around and they're like, yeah, it didn't work. You know what it made me think of, Jonathan, when you said red flag, it made me think of SEO firms that guarantee and promise number one rankings. I approach it with the same level of skepticism.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, maybe, probably not though.
Yeah, us marketers are just worn down. All right, final question, y'all, and then I'm going to have to pass it over to Mike. What's the first AI campaign that you launched that made you a believer? That's a great question to end on.
Here's the thing. I've been working with my co-founder on AI he's been working on it for almost 20 years. I've been working in it for about a decade. And one of the early models, I think it was like Facebook Profit, that could do predictive forecasting. I was like, and this was maybe 8-9 years ago. I was blown away. I was like, okay, I'm in. I'm a believer. And that was one of the things that helped us springboard into starting the company that we have today, was really seeing the potential of this technology and what could we do to bring it to marketers, to business operations. So I would say that would be my first quote unquote campaign that made me a believer.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Anyone else for this final question?
It's funny. I feel like I went all in. I don't know. I call it my existential crisis that I had, the beginning of last year. I'm just like, my brain blew up and I realized I could see the future vividly and I saw how much everything's going to change. And I was like, oh my gosh, and then I actually came back because I started building and using AI more. And that's actually, I went from like all in believer to more of a realist, like we've been talking about now, because I started trying to do it. And I realized it's not just this magic thing. It actually still takes a lot of work and data and all the things we've talked about. It will get there. I still am a believer, but it's not just magic. And to Jonathan's point too, the point we're at right now, we're building the electrical grid or laying the railroad tracks, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't, it doesn't exist yet. When it does, so much more will be possible.
That's well said. Any other final comments from the panel? No? I want to thank you all for this session today. It was really wonderful. Thank you to our panelists. And don't forget to take a moment to rate this session, if you will. And to wrap up the day, again, I hate to hand things over to Mike because this was so much fun, but I'm going to hand things over to Mike Pastor to wrap things up. Thank you so much for attending today.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks, Lauren. And thank you, panelists. And that is a wrap on what we hope was a day of insightful discussions around data and AI. All of today's MarTech conference sessions are going to be available on demand until January 15th, 2026. So if you missed one, if you want to hear one again, go ahead and do that. We hope you'll join us for the next edition of the MarTech conference, AI and Agents, Transforming Marketing Now and Redefining What's Next. That's happening online November 4th. If you've already pre-registered for that event, look for an email in the coming days that's going to ask you just to confirm your details and make sure we can still get in touch with you, and you'll be ready to go. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you on November 4th.
Join the MarTech Conference November 4th for one powerful day of real-world strategies and live expert insights. Scan the QR code on screen to register now for free.